At first, I didn't think it was real. I woke up to this blinding light, and I was transported to another place. Pluto TV! Then I heard a voice.
Come with me if you want to live.
There were thousands of movies and shows, and they were all free.
The truth is ours.
It's just so beautiful.
On Pluto TV, free streaming of Terminator 2, Fringe, Arrow, The 100, and The X-Files may cause excitement, loss of sleep, and sudden belief in extraterrestrials. No credit cards or alien encounters necessary. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
How is the war in Iran affecting you? That is our question. Welcome to The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson, along with our DJ Tolliver, who is diligently monitoring your online comments and emails at listentothemiddle.com, and kindly request that you stop writing in all caps.
I do, because I would love to scream your comments. I swear I'd love to scream them out loud, but it might get weird, okay?
That
So
would be a little strange. Tolliver, it has been almost 2 months since the U.S. and Israel started the war with Iran with a bombing campaign that killed the nation's supreme leader and many other senior officials, as well as many civilians. And while there is a ceasefire at the moment, a lot has changed because of the war, from the strength of our alliances and the U.S. image around the world to higher prices on gas and other items. And of course, thousands of American soldiers are currently deployed in the Middle East. So this hour, we want to know how the war is affecting you personally. And as always, we are taking your calls. Tolliver, how can people reach us?
You can call us at 8444-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. And like Jeremy said, I'm listening.
And you can also comment on our live stream on YouTube. And if you're watching or listening to us for the first time on Spotify, welcome. Please follow the show so you don't miss an episode. Joining me this hour, former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, who served as the lead U.S. negotiator for the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Secretary Sherman, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And Isaac Saul is also with us, the founder of Tangle News. Isaac, welcome to you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Wendy Sherman, let me start with you. Let's talk about the big picture first. What do you think are the most significant geopolitical changes since this war began?
Oh, good Lord. That's quite a question. Unfortunately, quite a few. You know, Sarah Longwell, who's the publisher of The Bulwark, coined the phrase that this is almost like superpower suicide. What the president has done in this very tactically successful but strategically deplorable approach to this war and to getting Iran to ensure Iran never has a nuclear weapon has created all kinds of tentacles of problems. Everything from the gas prices that everybody pays every day, to the price of groceries, to fertilizer for farmers, helium for MRIs, plastics, as you pointed out, everything that affects our day-to-day life. But it's also affected countries all across the world. As high as our gas prices are, if you're in Asia, I was with some Asians last night for dinner, sky high. People have to really pull back because they can't afford anything. We have frayed our alliances and our partnerships around the world with our disparaging comments about them. We didn't have a closed Strait of Hormuz. We had freedom of navigation, ships going through the strait until this war. Now we have Iran in charge of the Strait of Hormuz. We have a blockade, which may be an effective tool on one hand, but certainly isn't opening up the strait to the movement of traffic to lower those prices. And then
but do you see, let me stop you there just to ask you, so do you see that the main consequences so far globally are economic rather than about our alliances or power dynamics?
I think it's some of both, to tell you the truth, Jeremy. Certainly for people's day-to-day lives, it's economic. And as was once famously said, it's economic stupid. It all comes down to that for people. So I would say that's the most important, even for the people in Iran. They've gotten a very hardline government. Their lives are not getting better. They've gotten worse too.
Isaac Saul, how do you see it? What are the biggest consequences from this war so far?
Yeah, I think the things that Wendy highlighted there are certainly relevant and stuff I would put on my list. I mean, it really can't be overstated, the impact that this is having on countries across Asia, Southeast Asia. I mean, places like the Philippines have literal national emergencies in effect where people are being told not to go to work to conserve fuel across the country. We've been insulated in some ways from that. Obviously, we're feeling some of the economic impact. I think one thing I might add that could be long-term a positive framing of what's happening, which I think is incidental. I don't think it was part of the Trump administration's plan, but the way Iran reacted to the initial strikes by turning on its Gulf neighbors and, dropping bombs and shooting missiles into residential areas in some of these Gulf countries like Qatar and, Saudi Arabia. I mean, those places, I think the leaders in those countries are going to, at the end of this conflict, be looking to unify and ally themselves in much more clear terms, I imagine, with the United States. I mean, I'd be curious to hear what Wendy thinks about that. I've never sat in these negotiating rooms like she has, but I suspect that there's way, way, way less trust and patience for Iran from some of our Gulf partners who have for a long time kind of walked the line. And, isolating Iran, there are upsides to that potentially down the road. Again, I don't think the Trump administration planned that. I think the way Iran reacted sort of isolated them even further than they already were. I'm hopeful, if you're really reaching for potential positive outcomes from this war, that maybe that's one of them, this sort of unified front with the Gulf states, the United States, Israel. But I think the impact in large part has been economic in some of these countries that rely on oil getting out of the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, the stuff that we're seeing domestically here, not just the gas prices, but the political blowback. I mean, MAGA is really fractured right now because of this war. And there's a lot of people who feel like Donald Trump betrayed them. Right. And I think that's going to have real implications in November.
Well, and I'm sure we're going to hear from some listeners about that. But Wendy, Sherman, one, I guess, potential upside for some. When this war started, we opened up the phones and we heard from many Iranian-Americans living in the United States, some in Los Angeles, which is nicknamed Tarangelous because there are so many in L.A., who were very happy that the U.S. had gotten involved and had killed the brutal dictator, the Ayatollah there. Do you have any sense of whether whoever comes next will be any better?
Sadly, no. In fact, I think we have an even more hardline regime in Iran than we had before this war started. Mujtaba Khamenei, who's the son of the supreme leader who was assassinated, was never thought to be his father's successor because his father thought he was too close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that he didn't know how to balance all of the interests. And people think because there's a supreme leader, there aren't politics in Iran, but there are. But after the war, the generals came together, and even though Mujtaba was clearly severely hurt in the attack on his father, his sister, his wife, his brother, nonetheless, they made him the leader because he's controlled by the general. I think there was an excellent article in the New York Times today about that. So unfortunately, I think the Iranian people, and remember, Donald Trump started this saying he was going to have the back of the protesters who had been slaughtered by this brutal regime. They've sort of been forgotten. And one more thing, Jeremy, I hope we get to. President of the United States is about to go to China in the middle of May. This has big consequences for that relationship.
Yeah, that's going to be a big thing to watch as well. I just want to sneak in a call here because we've got somebody calling from New York City and who may have a direct stake here in what's going on. Devon, tell me, how is the war affecting you?
Hey, Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Go ahead.
Good. Yes, the war is affecting me is because basically I'm a New York City taxi driver, and with the gas prices are so high. Okay, it's on like $4.38, and I'm a taxi driver, and half of that comes out of my salary. And then two, I had to raise the prices on my customers because of the gas prices. It's just ridiculously high, and it's just causing me, as you'll say, as I'll say, as Trump would say, a lot of pain. It feels like I'm being lied to. If you remember in the State of the Union, he said that the gas prices were down, and then a week later, he jumps into this war. You know, so it's just like it's just a whole bunch of lies, and just very, very, very. I just feel, very, very. I don't feel hopeful. I have no hope no more.
Yeah.
Just have no hope.
Devon, thank you for that. Isaac Saul, I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of that, but that is really so direct. As somebody who, is paying more at the pump, it comes out of their salary, and that's how they say they feel like they've been lied to by the president.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had good news. I think the reality is the kind of energy price shock that we're seeing is just beginning, and it's going to take a long time for it to kind of stabilize and be undone. I mean, one of the key things here, as Wendy mentioned at the top, is that this Strait of Hormuz, this incredibly important shipping lane, especially for oil and especially for countries across Asia, was open before the war and is now closed. 100 tankers were freely passing through it a day, and now we have something like 1 to 5. And I think the oil price shock we've seen rapidly hit our coastlines at the pumps. I would add, too, that diesel is even more expensive and is rising even faster. So for a lot of truckers and people in the shipping industry, it's an even bigger deal. But it's going to be slow to come down. I mean, historically, undoing those kinds of price shocks takes a lot of time. And I think that's the thing that's really scary is, Trump is already telling voters, we might not get this under $3 or $3.50 where it was before the November midterms, which are months away right now. So I think that's the part that worries me and, gives me a lot of empathy for people like Devon in those industries and in that situation.
Right. It does make you feel at least good when you go to the gas pump and you realize that you don't have to pay the diesel price. At least you're only paying the regular unleaded price at the pump. A reminder that we are taking your calls. Our number is 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. And Tolliver, it has been a while, but the U.S. has dealt with trouble in the Strait of Hormuz before.
That's right. Listen to this clip from Jim Lehrer on the PBS NewsHour back in 1987 talking about President Reagan navigating this issue.
President Reagan served notice on Iran today. He said the United States would not allow Iran to close the important oil shipping lanes through the Persian Gulf.
That's an international waterway. Can you imagine the precedent that would be set if we all stepped back and said, well, this barbaric country has a right to close down these international waters and bring down the economic havoc that it would on so many countries?
In the end, back in 1987, Iran did not close the strait, but the U.S. Navy did start escorting tankers through it. By the way, if you are just joining us for the first time on Spotify, welcome. We do this every week. We take on a different topic. We take your calls, so be sure to follow us. And if you're a Spotify Premium member, no ads. We'll be right back with your calls on The Middle. This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. If you're just tuning in, The Middle is a national call-in show. We're focused on elevating voices from the middle, geographically, politically, philosophically, or maybe you just want to meet in the middle. This hour, we're asking how the Iran war is affecting you. And Tolliver, how can people reach us?
You can call us at 844-4MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. You can also write to us at listentothemiddle.com or on YouTube.
I'm joined by former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman and Isaac Saul, the founder of Tangle News. And before we get to the phones, Wendy Sherman, what about the nuclear issue? Do you expect that at the end of the day here, when there is some kind of a deal, if there is some kind of a deal, that it's going to be better, worse, or the same as the one that you negotiated back in 2015?
Look, I may not be a supporter of the president's, but I hope for even a better deal than we got. I don't see that in the offing right now, unfortunately. There's an enormous gap between what it appears the administration wants and what Iran will agree to. The fundamental issue is Iran believes that it not only has a right to a civil nuclear program, but it has a right to enrich uranium, which, when enriched to a very high level, becomes the fuel necessary for a nuclear weapon. That's in the simplest terms I can talk about it. And so the president would like Iran to never enrich ever again, and he'd like to get hold of a very huge stockpile, like 1,000 pounds worth of 60% enriched uranium It only has to get to 90% to be used as fuel for a nuclear weapon. It's not far from 60 to 90 technically. And and that's buried underneath some of the bombing that the United States and Israel undertook in June. So this is really tough going. Iran has a lot of pride and believes this is their right. And they will probably not concede on this issue. The president looks like maybe he has an idea of saying, well, why don't you suspend the program for X number of years? So there's a negotiation, I believe, to be had here, but getting everybody to the table has gotten harder, not easier.
And Isaac Saul, what about the cost of the war, which will be paid for by all of us? The White House reportedly wants at least $100 billion in supplemental funds for this war, not to mention they're looking at $1.5 trillion for the military for the next year. Is there an appetite for that in Congress?
No, I think most members of Congress who are going to be the votes that matter, the people that are kind of the swing votes, are really, really, really hesitant to greenlight a $1.5 trillion Pentagon bill. That they recognize that, if you're a conservative and you're a Republican, you recognize that Trump ran on not spending a bunch of money fighting wars in the Middle East, and they don't want to rubber stamp that because they see the anger on the MAGA side of the aisle. And if you're a Democrat, you obviously are not going to, give a green light $500 billion additional dollars for the Pentagon for a war that you didn't support. You don't think the president had the legal authority to launch, and so on. I would add to, look, Iran's at the negotiating table, clearly understanding its leverage. They're asking for some reparations for the war. The UAE has come out and said that they may need the United States to bail out their economy, which is in free fall because of the war. And Americans are paying for it at home with, gas prices and soon to be inflation related to the cost of shipping and goods and everything coming back. Right. So it is pretty remarkable when you think about it, just in the modern day, how much a war like this does disrupt the economy and how quickly the costs add up. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's one of the things that is disappointing about the decision to launch this war in what felt like a pretty improvisational, ham-fisted manner, is that the president ran against a history of doing that. And he had a really compelling message around it, and it feels like this undermines all that.
Well, and the president and members of Congress just said that they couldn't afford to extend people's Obamacare subsidies at the beginning of the year, but they apparently can afford this war. Let's go to the phone. Susan is calling in from Essex, Connecticut. Susan, go ahead with your thoughts. How is the Iran war affecting you?
Hi, yes, thank you. Like everyone else, the gas prices are higher. Food costs are higher, but I just remind people that in June of 22, the average gallon of gas was $5 a gallon, and that was under the Biden administration. So $4 a gallon or $4.50 a gallon right now, you have to put it all in context. I'm actually a government employee, so I'm also living with everything else that's happened under the Trump administration. I voted for Trump, and just to remind people that not everyone's MAGA. A lot of people that voted for Trump are intelligent people, good-thinking people, but we just wanted a change. And I think what's happening with this war, I think we need to back it. We've backed all other wars that all other presidents have gotten us into. We've spent billions in Ukraine, helping them. And our job, I think, a lot of us don't know the extent of the classified information that's needed to go into a war like that, and to act like we do and pontificate about it, I think is dangerous.
But you believe the rationale for it. You're in favor of it. You believe the rationale for the war right now.
I am in favor of it because to go to war like that, there had to be information so great and so dangerous that they would do that. And I do believe that they did it to protect us.
Okay. Susan, thank you very much for that call. Wendy, Sherman, you've been in the negotiating room, but what do you think about what Susan is saying there? And do you think that Iran was, as the president has said, just a couple of weeks away from potentially having a nuclear weapon, and there was reason to go in when he did?
I don't think there was an imminent threat, but I do understand what Susan has said, and I understand that when you are going about your day-to-day life, taking care of your family, you have to put some trust in your government that maybe they know things you don't know. And when I was in government, you do read intelligence, you do know things that the general public doesn't know. But there was no way that Iran was 2 weeks away from a nuclear weapon. They didn't have the material for a nuclear weapon. Then they have to do what's called weaponize it. They have to turn it into a bomb, and then they have to attach it to a launch vehicle like a missile. They hadn't done any of that. And yes, it is true, they were closer to getting enough of that fissile material, that highly enriched uranium that was a critical element to getting to a nuclear weapon. That's true. But they weren't 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. And yes, they had enough material, if it was enriched further, for several bombs. So I understand the anxiety about Iran, and they are a brutal regime. And everybody believes they should never have a nuclear weapon. Whether you're right, left, or in the middle, they should not have a nuclear weapon. When we did the deal back in 2015, we knew the choice was diplomacy, to try to get time on the calendar so they wouldn't get a nuclear weapon, or a war that had all of the effects that we are now experiencing. We thought we had a way forward. It wasn't perfect, but it really did buy us a hell of a lot of time.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for the consequences that everybody's facing now.
Let's go to Nita, who's calling in from Utah. Nita, what about you? How is the war affecting you?
Well, I'd like to say how is it not affecting me personally? We're talking from family members being deployed to undisclosed locations, to the gas stations at the pump. Food is more expensive. Everything's more expensive. And how is it not? And the stress level of this alone is insane.
What do you feel about the reasons for the war? Do you think that there's any case to be made for this war?
Was there any reason for it? Well, I get it. Iran was off. They're a unique group of people. Don't get me wrong. They didn't need a nuclear weapon, but we can't get a straight answer from this administration. I mean, it's 12 different things, and he lies constantly, and it's like we look like fools to the rest of the world. I mean, everything comes out of his mouth is a lie, and it's like, okay, so now what? We look like we don't know what we're doing.
Nita,
so,
yeah,
and it gives me anxiety. It gives me anxiety, and it just with family members over there. I mean, it's one thing to have a war that I believe in, saving our country or protecting our country, but I don't even know why half of the time why they were over there. I mean, at this point, why don't they just come home?
Nita, thank you very much for that. You can hear that, Isaac, just the personal connection, obviously, that so many Americans have when they've got a family member who is deployed, but also Nita's point about the trust in the administration. She doesn't believe anything that the president is saying.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, maybe this is just a reflection of my own politics being in the middle, but I feel drawn both to Nita and Susan's perspectives at the same time. I mean, to what Susan said on when she called in, I even wrote in some of my commentary about this war that I presume there are things that I don't know that our intelligence agencies know that might evoke the response and the fear that they have going into this conflict. At the same time, to what Nita just said, the president is, for better or for worse, one of the most transparent presidencies we've ever had in terms of media access and kind of talking to the press and explaining his rationale on the fly. I mean, there are things that he's done that I think are not transparent, but it's easy to hear his opinion and thought process. You just have to call him and ask him, and reporters do that. And at press conferences, he's very forthcoming about how he's thinking about things. And, to that end, his rationale has shifted a ton. I mean, in the early days, it was all about liberating the Iranian people, and we were going to do this to sort of provoke this uprising. Then it was about nuclear weapons, and then it wasn't really about nuclear weapons. It was about destroying their navy and destroying their air force. And then we didn't really care about the regime change. And then the Strait of Hormuz had to open up, but no, it didn't. And we didn't need anybody's help, but everybody had to help. I mean, it has been a really big moving target, which makes it really difficult to gauge what's a success even in the president's eyes. And I think from my perspective, while I, like Susan, I'm rooting for the president and I'm hoping that the war, brings more safety to us and our allies in the Middle East, I also feel the frustration that Nita does, where I feel like the justification has not really been clear at any
Well,
point.
and we remember that the Strait of Hormuz was open before the war started, too. Right. So if that's the end goal, that seems a bit strange. There is one person who is definitely easier to get in touch with than President Trump is when reporters call, and that is Tolliver, who has been checking out the phone number and listen to themiddle.com. Like that transition. Tolliver, what's coming in?
Yeah, Lotta in Chicago says, what is Congress doing to curb the war or the effects of it? Billy in Savannah says, where are the WMDs from the last time we went to Iran? LOL. This is on the internet, y'all. Google it. Iran has been 2 weeks away from a WMD for 20 years. And Johannes in Florida says, Iran would be stupid not to pursue nuclear weapons now after U.S. aggression going back to at least the 1950s. So lots coming in, yeah.
All right, let's get to another call. Philip is calling in from Rosenberg, Texas. Philip, what about you? How's the war affecting you?
Thank you, Jeremy. I mean, it's an understatement for you to talk about the war, the way it's affecting people. I mean, it's everywhere. And, as we watch things, and I'm not here to condemn President Trump, because as a Christian, I believe that we should support the president. Was the war with Iran necessary? Of course it was necessary. And I believe that if you ask 85% of Americans, they will support the same idea. Okay? Even Iranians were very much happy that this was taking place. But I think where we went wrong is the manner in which this entire war was prosecuted. And it's a difficult thing because my first degree was in political science. Of course, I'm a clergy person now, and I was talking with somebody, and the person said, well, we don't need to leave our boundaries. Do you know that America is the leader of the world? America's boundary is not restricted to North America. America is all over the world. But what this war has done is to create an environment for the enemies of the United States to see the loopholes. I mean, because the fact of the matter is there are no career diplomats. Every one of them were kicked out. Yeah. Nobody, and even right now, people still don't want to accept the fact that indeed, mistakes have been done. Like you look at the Secretary of War, as they call him. He used to be a journalist, and one time I saw him, he was on the air talking about trying to pick up headlines for media institutions. As a media practitioner, you don't do that.
Okay, so Philip, let me take your thoughts here. That's interesting points, and let me take your thoughts here to Wendy Sherman, because I guess the big picture there is, what has this done to America's power around the world? Is it, as Philip says, making us look like fools?
I think the problem, and Philip is putting his finger on this, I think, is we are a powerful country. There's no question about it. We do have the strongest economy, the most extraordinary military. Politically, we've been a democracy, and we've been very proud of that as we approach the 250th anniversary of the founding of this country. But we have also stood for a set of values and what democracy and freedom means. And because of the way the war has been waged and the president's comments about the war and about the people who are or aren't supporting him in what he's doing, we've lost a lot of that, what Joe Nye called soft power. People believing in the United States, believing that we will be there, that yes, we shouldn't be the policemen of the world. Yes, we can't take care of every problem in the world. But as the caller pointed out, So many of our diplomats are gone. There aren't experts at the table for these negotiations. I'm glad Vice President Vance brought some last time, but these are highly complex negotiations, and you need people with a lot of experience, as I was fortunate to have, including the Secretary of Energy, Ernie Moniz, who was a nuclear physicist. I wasn't. So you need all of that, and when the world watches how the president's approaching this, they wonder whether the United States is the country that they believed it to be.
Interesting to think about it, soft power that way too, because you think about the hard power of the United States, which sometimes is more powerful when you're not using it and it's a threat than when you actually do use it and show people what happens when you do use it. We're taking your calls at 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can write to us at listentothemiddle.com. Tolliver, as I said, we opened the phones right after the war started almost 2 months ago and heard from many Iranian-Americans, some in Los Angeles, who were quite happy.
Yeah, many of them were hopeful about a possible uprising, which so far has not happened. Take a listen to this caller.
I'm Richard from Los Angeles, an Iranian that has lived in the U.S. for over 50 years, and I applaud U.S. for continuing to get rid of this corrupt regime. A few months ago, they killed 32,000 people in the street. How in the hell are we thinking that people of Iran are going to be able to have a revolution? This is not 1979. This regime is ruthless, and it has to be eliminated.
That was a call that we got on our show back in January, Tolliver. And again, if you like this show, follow us. We would love to have you every week. We'll be right back with more of your calls on The Middle. This is The Middle. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This hour, we're asking how the war in Iran is affecting you. I am joined by Isaac Saul, the founder of Tangle News, and former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman. You can call us at 844-4-MIDDLE. That's 844-464-3353. Or you can reach out at listentothemiddle.com. And by the way, if you don't get through on the phones, leave a message and we will get to more of your calls in our weekly podcast extra. Let's go to Sue, who's in Rossville, Illinois. Sue, go ahead with your thoughts about how the Iran war is affecting you.
Yes, hi, and hi, Wendy. I'd like to make 2 points. I've been a nurse for 55 years, living in urban areas, but now I'm in a rural area here. And I see a lot of impact. People are curtailing their travel because it's so expensive to go long distances. School buses, for example, are incurring extraordinary fuel costs. And also, nurses here, many of them drive 2 hours to get to the hospitals where they work. I heard that lithium may be an issue. So there's issues that it will affect health care. Also, in regard to the comment that was made about Mideastern countries being allies to the U.S. after the war, I disagree with that. This war was Israel motivated. I don't think these Middle Eastern countries are going to trust the United States any more than our former allies are trusting us now. We've lost trust across the board. And I think that's extremely dangerous. Instead of diplomacy and the treaty that was in place, we now have a strait that is blocked with 5 ships going through. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Sue, thank you very much for that. Isaac Saul, she brings up lithium as a nurse. And I wonder, in your reporting, what you found about the various things that are going to get tied up if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed for much longer.
Yeah, I think probably the better question is what won't get tied up. I mean, first of all, just, crude oil is such a huge and important product, whether we like it or not. I mean, it's in so many things. We all think about the gas pump, but, you've mentioned things like plastics and there's the helium conversation that's been happening that, tons of really jarring reporting. It seems like energy reporters and people who cover this kind of stuff for a living and for a beat, and also people who trade in the energy markets are very, very, very skittish right now about what the future is going to look like. I do just want to respond to one other thing that the last caller said there, which, I do think it's true that this war is going to negatively impact our trust with some of our allies and potentially with other countries in the Middle East. I also think that, a lesser told story, and one just to defend the president a bit here, is that there are a lot of places that wanted this confrontation with Iran, but didn't want to go about it in this particular way. And I think might even be happy that the president has done what he's done to just do it and get it over with. This has obviously been a conflict that's been brewing, especially between Iran and Israel for many, many years. And I think there's probably more leaders on the global stage. They're not coming forward right now because things are not going well. But if you had asked them a couple months ago, they might have preferred a confrontation because they felt like somebody had to step up and do this. And I do think those global leaders are out there. I think Saudi Arabia for sure is one of those countries that is kind of urging the United States and Israel to keep pushing.
Yeah.
And I don't want to discount the point that Israel certainly tried to, influence our decision making here. I think the reporting there is pretty clear. Netanyahu wanted Trump to do this. He lobbied him to do this. But I don't think they were alone in that, is all I'll say.
Wendy, Sherman, by the way, on the issue of sort of other countries around the world, are you surprised at the reaction from Europe, which it's like it doesn't seem to be very loud. If they're angry about what's happening there, they're not. There's not a leader that has come out like there was during the Iraq War. Maybe you have Jacques Chirac or something like that, who's like, we are definitely against what's happening here.
Well, I think there are several things going on. The president didn't go around the world and ask people to come with him. He went on his own with Israel, but he basically went on his own. And it's true that many of the Gulf states want to see the end of Iran messing around with stability in the Middle East. But they now are of mixed minds because their economies are hurting. The future that they all had been planning to sort of get out from under, this view that they were backwards countries and could now have a great economic future, that's been tarnished. So I think it's a mixed bag where the Gulf states are concerned. And Canada's Prime Minister Carney's been very outspoken about his feelings, Prime Minister Starmer. I think Europe, however, Europe on the continent has been very focused on Ukraine, understanding it now is holding the bag for giving support to Ukraine because President Trump has backed away from that, believing it's Europe's problem, not an American problem. Though if Putin goes beyond Ukraine to other parts of Europe, it will become an American problem because it'll become a world war in quick order. One hopes, of course, that doesn't happen.
Let's go to Rowan, who's calling in from Chicago. Rowan, what about you? How's the Iran war affecting you?
Yeah, so I mean, I drive for work and I'm not reimbursed on any of those miles, and I'm driving at least, anywhere between 300 and 500 miles a month just for work. And it doesn't, it doesn't include any of my personal miles. So that really adds up.
And do you see any reason for having to pay that extra money at the pump? Does it make any sense to you why it's happening?
No, I mean, just to be clear, I didn't vote for Trump, but I also didn't vote for Kamala Harris. But I thought the one good thing that I thought Trump was saying was that we're done with these pointless wars. I mean, we've been buying both Democrat-led and Republican wars for forever, and it just feels like, why are we doing this? This isn't a thing that all countries do. I don't have any particular problem with Iran. We support lots of other countries that are doing terrible things, and I just think we have no place like telling other countries what their government is supposed to look like, or invading them. I just feel like we have so many problems here in this country, and I would like to see us focus on this and not on again these just endless wars. And again, it can't be that Iran is uniquely evil, because Israel just murdered 60,000 people. So I feel fed up.
Just let me ask you, Ron, how old are you?
I'm 30.
30. Okay. Thank you for that call. Isaac Saul, what do you hear when you hear Rowan talk about that?
I mean, I think, I'm 34 years old. I think there's a generation of Americans who kind of fall into this millennial bracket who are starting to have a lot of voting power and say right now, who grew up in the shadow of 9/11 and then watched our response to that attack on our country and what it cost us and the global economic strife and the lives that were cost. Our generation is incredibly skeptical of international conflicts, and I think that's just the reality. We're not a generation that has a sort of spirit of World War II or Cold War confrontation where we feel like the United States should be going around sort of spreading democracy via force across the globe. And so there's just fatigue there, and I think what you hear from callers like that, and that I think is a really, really common feeling and perception among my friends for sure, is you find out some missile we launched cost $80 million to shoot into Tehran and kill a bunch of civilians, and then you take your kid to school where the budget is a quarter of that, and you can't get any money from the federal government or the state government to update a classroom or pay teachers more or whatever else, fill the potholes in your hometown. And it's hard not to see that money going out the door to a conflict like this and not feel some kind of frustration.
Yeah. Let's go to William, who's calling in from Cincinnati, Ohio. Hi, William. Go ahead with your thoughts about the war in Iran. How's it affecting you?
Oh, I feel optimistic about it. It's a little disingenuous, I think, of the representation of misrepresentation of the war and of Trump. And it's only an issue because of Trump. If it was Biden or Obama or something, it would not be an issue.
What are you optimistic that will happen, William?
Well, that we get rid of this terrorist country. I've served my country since the late 70s until after Desert Storm, and through Desert Storm, and then I came back and served for 12 years after 9/11 at the 82nd Airborne. And I've had friends in Iraq and Afghanistan, lost friends. But I'm definitely... we just want to let this tyrant, mullahs, keep pursuing nuclear weapons, and they kill American soldiers and Americans and other allies. Just let them keep going. And I'm grateful that Trump had the courage and the guts to stand up to him.
Yeah, William, thank you for
we have to back Israel.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for your call. And Wendy, Sherman, how do you respond there to William, who sounds like has served in the military?
First of all, William, thank you so much for your service to our country. So many years, which is a hardship on the people that you love as well, who worried about you every time you were in service and were deployed. So thank you so much for everything you've done. I understand the desire to go after Iran. They are horrible. They did slaughter their own people. They do perhaps, maybe definitely want to get a nuclear weapon. They certainly want to have the choice to do that. And that's very, very dangerous. But I don't see the end of this turning out well. I don't think that the U.S., Democrat or Republican, has ever been very good at regime change. I'm at the other end from Isaac and the last caller. I'm about to be 77 years old. I grew up during Vietnam and came of political age then and protested in the streets against that war, because every time we got close to thinking we were going to win, it was just one more deployment, one more weapon, one more attack. And at the end of the day, it didn't work. We just don't do this well because adversaries use what's called asymmetric means, which you understand very well. Same thing in Iraq, same thing in Afghanistan. Again, it doesn't matter. It's not about whether it's a Republican president or a Democrat president. We do not do regime change well because even though our conventional military is superb, absolutely the best in the world, all Iran has to do is hit one target in one of our ally and partner countries, kill 13 American soldiers, get our gas prices up, close the Strait of Hormuz, hurt the economy, use their drones, and we have to come to a stalemate. So that's why I think we should have tried diplomacy for a while longer. All diplomacy, and then I'll stop, but all diplomacy needs a credible threat of force, always. I just don't think in this case we had to use it.
Let's hear from Gerald, who's calling in from Detroit, Michigan. Gerald, what about you? How's the war affecting you?
Well, like all of us, the economics of it. But I'm retired military, Vietnam vet, Cold War vet. And I think America has met its David, as in the Old Testament of David and Goliath. Our country is now a little more peril because we've used up a lot of our munitions. The regime, obviously, I have no love for the regime, but at the same time, I think they were a long way from what they were doing, and diplomacy, as been just spoken about before, should have been followed, not the way Trump is doing it. Everybody has no patience. If we were going to do this, as has been mentioned, we would have brought in all the forces together, all the countries together. We didn't do that, and so we're sitting on a spigot, and we're looking rather foolish. So I feel sorry for our country, and it's going to take a long time for us to repair the damage that has been done.
Gerald, thank you for that, and thank you for your service as well. Isaac Saul, again, getting back to the point just about U.S. power and what's happening to it as a result of this war.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I listen to those callers, the thing that I fear about the future, the thing that I think I'm most worried about is what I've sort of coined as the ambient war in the future, which is we sort of stop paying attention to what's happening in Iran in the next few months, but the conflict on the ground and the money that we're pouring into the war and the stalemate in the Strait of Hormuz continues. And it sort of just gets punctuated by a story here about a naval officer being killed, or a story there about us assassinating a particular Iranian general or something. And otherwise, Americans just begin to get accustomed to these $4 or $5 gas prices like we had in 2022, except they don't go away and they go down much more slowly. And we get accustomed to hearing about another soldier dying in Iran in some skirmish with Iranian forces. And it just sort of starts happening in the background, kind of like how the Ukraine war has become a little bit of an ambient war. It's just this background noise that we hear occasionally some really big headlines about. And all the while, we're pouring more and more money into it. We're putting more and more soldiers at risk. We're not making progress with Iran. And we're suffering these domestic consequences like gas prices going up, food costs going up. I think that's really my big fear. And, I just, right now, at least, I don't see a clear path out or a clear plan out how we're going to avoid that. Yeah. And so I just fear the sort of long-term quagmire.
And this is somebody who's covered daily news for many years. I remember sort of how almost ambient it felt when we were hearing about soldiers being killed in Iraq and Afghanistan year after year after year. And you're wondering, should this be the top story today? Or is this just more of what is happening in this country now? We've run out of time for callers, but Wendy Sherman, I want to give you the last word before we go here, because you've also been involved in your career in U.S.-Cuba relations. And President Trump has said that Cuba is next. You had Venezuela, and then you had Iran, and he has said Cuba is next. Do you expect the U.S. to invade Cuba this year or try for regime change in Cuba while President Trump is the president?
I hope we don't put soldiers on the ground in Cuba. We've had some episodes in the past where that hasn't gone very well, particularly when we sent the CIA in to try to create regime change in Cuba. Again, this is a bad regime. The economy of Cuba is a disaster. The people's lives are tough, really tough. I know that Secretary Rubio knows Cuba well, having been of Cuban-American descent.
Grew up in Miami.
Grew up in Miami. He obviously was one of the architects of the Maduro situation. So he has great hope, and we would all like to see a change, and the oil embargo is certainly a good thing. But I hope we don't put soldiers on the ground in Cuba.
That is former Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, and we've also been speaking with Isaac Saul, the founder of Tangle News. Thanks to both of you for joining us this hour.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And a quick reminder, we're taking the show on the road to Kenosha, Wisconsin on May 12th. For tickets to be in the audience and participate, just go to listentothemiddle.com.
And we'll have more of your thoughts on Iran on our podcast feed. Just subscribe to The Middle to watch or listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Middle is brought to you by Long Nook Media, distributed by Illinois Public Media in Urbana, Illinois, and produced by Harrison Patino, Danny Alexander, Sam Burmistaz, John Barth, Johnny Leonidas, and Marina Price. Our technical director is Steve Mork. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week.